Yá'át'ééh, my relatives. Good afternoon. Actually, it is Friday afternoon, February 11th, and I'm sitting down with my second cup of coffee. And there's a few things I want to talk about today, especially regarding Native journalism and journalism from the margins. But before I began, as I always do, I'd like to start by acknowledging the people whose land I'm on. So I moved here from the Navajo Nation to what's now known as Washington, D.C., about 6 years ago with my family. And this area is the traditional lands of the Piscataway. I want to honor and thank the Piscataway for being the indigenous hosts of these lands. I want to thank them for their stewardship of these lands. And I want to just state how humbled I am to be living on these lands today. So, yeah, my Piscataway relatives, thank you for your stewardship, your ongoing stewardship of these lands. So this morning, I had a tweet that came across my Twitter regarding an author, a journalist who I know well, and I wanted to. He's actually written an article about me regarding my campaign. We'll talk about that later. But he is an incredible indigenous journalist, does freelance work, and has been published extensively, has won numerous awards. And I saw this morning that he was awarded yesterday an award for his journalism. And so I tweeted this morning. I said, I'm thrilled to see Julian Brave NoiseCat is being recognized for excellence in long-form narrative, our deep reporting about underrepresented and or misrepresented groups in the United States. And so I tweeted that out and it's gotten some traction, but I wanted just to talk a little bit about Julian's work and why not only his work, but the work of so many other Native and African American and other journalists who report not just about the margins, but from the margins, and why their work is so important. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. I see that Phil is on here. Hey, Phil, thanks for joining. It's good to have you here. I see that Debbie is on. Debbie, Yá'át'ééh, thanks for joining. It's good to have people on. We have a fairly good sized group out this morning, and I'm feeling good. I actually was able to watch the sunrise every morning this week. And so today was my fifth morning. So I'm feeling a little tired because getting up every morning at 6 o'clock to go out and watch the sunrise wears on you. But it was an honor and a joy to be able to watch the sunrise every morning this week. It's going to be cloudy over the weekend, I think. So I may not be able to watch the sunrise for the next few days, but definitely grateful for all of the sunrises I could watch earlier this week. Anyway, let me share two of the articles that wrote about Julian and the award that he received. The first, and this was the one that I saw first this morning, was in Indian Country Today, and it was titled Writer activist Julian Brave NoiseCat wins $100,000 American Mosaic Journalism Prize. And then the second article that I found was written by Native News Online, and this article was titled, let me post this here too. Writer and activist Julian Brave NoiseCat wins $100,000 American Mosaic Journalism Prize. I think it was the same title. Anyway, I wanted to just share both of those. The first one was from Indian Country Today. The next one was from Native News Online. I encourage you to read both of those. And one of the things that would really struck me in this about Julian, and as I said, I had an opportunity to meet him. He was actually at the Frank Lemire Native American Presidential Forum that I attended in 2019. And he did an interview with me after I spoke on stage and published one of the best articles about my campaign that was written in the entire 2020 election. I'll share that article with you here. It was actually published in Esquire, and it was titled Elizabeth Warren Was Well Received at the Native American Presidential Forum. Mark Charles was the main event. And so he published that, wrote that after my article or after my interview with him. And one of the things I really appreciated about being interviewed by Julian and about the story he wrote is because he's from Indian country, right? I didn't have to explain a lot of things. He understood what I was talking about and was very much able to understand why I was doing what I was doing. And so the article he wrote and the articles written by other Native journalists were so important to my campaign because they actually were able to capture much more of the heart of my campaign, whereas non-Native journalists were kind of observing it as this is unique or this is intriguing, and they were really looking much at some of the much deeper issues. And so I encourage you to read that article that was written by Julian. But when they were writing the story in Native News Online today about the award that he received, this is one of the quotes that they had. And they said, NoiseCat, Julian Brave NoiseCat, 28 years old, told Native News Online that most of his reporting and writing is simply a product of, and quoting now, just living and being in Indian country and believing that the happenings around him are newsworthy and that people should pay attention to them. Right? That I love that quote because what Julian's saying is he lives in and among Indian country. He's just among our people. And he's observing the things that he's seeing and the things that are happening, and he's reporting on them and writing on them because he sees their importance and he believes other people need to be paying attention to these sorts of things. And he, as I said, he's a very good journalist. He's written some incredible stories. If you actually go to his website, which you can get from his Twitter account. So let me share with you his Twitter account. But if you go to his website, you can actually get a link to all of the articles that he's published. And he's been published not only in Esquire, but in a lot of really other high profile publications. And so you can get to his website from his Twitter account, which I just put right there. Um, I also want to share one of the stories that I believe he actually got the award for. The award was given obviously this past week, so it was for reporting done in 2021. And one of the stories that he worked on in 2021 was put out. It was a podcast put out by Snap Judgment, and it's called the Census Powwow, and it's about a Native nation and Cheyenne Brady, who it says Cheyenne Brady knew next to nothing about the U.S. Census when she was given the job of counting everyone on her reservation. Writer Julian Brave NoiseCat follows her through the ups and downs of the 2020 census, culminating in the first ever Census Powwow. So I just found out about this podcast today. I began listening to it this morning. I haven't finished it, but again, it's very insightful. I'm enjoying listening to it. I intend to finish it later today. So I encourage you to go to this page and you can get that whole podcast. You can download it and listen to it. It's about an hour long, but I encourage you to do that. Now, the bigger question is, why are these things so important? Right? Why is it important that we not only have Native journalists reporting about the margins, or even just any journalists reporting about the margins, right? One of the challenges within Indian country is our events just don't get reported on, right? This is why missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls is such a big issue, because the nation doesn't report on what's going on in Indian country. This is why most of the country doesn't know that Native men have a higher percentage, a greater chance statistically of being shot by police officers than African American men, right? Not that it's a contest, but people don't know this because the deaths and the things that happen within Indian country don't get reported on. And so part of the move is just we need the nation to pay better attention. We need the nation to report on what is going on within Indian country, and that is important. But as I found with my campaign when I was running, where I spoke to a lot of reporters, and most of them saw my campaign as something of interest, something that was maybe a feel-good story, but they weren't wrestling with the issues we were really trying to grapple with in the campaign. And it was the Native journalists, like Julian Brave NoiseCat, like Jordan Begay, and others who wrote about our campaign from Indian country, who actually really got and saw much more deeply what we were trying to do as a campaign. And so it's not just about we need more people to write about Indian country. We actually need a growth of people from the margins reporting about the margins. And one of the reasons I want to share why this is important, I'm going to give you this article right now. And it's from Indian Country Today. It ran this morning. I didn't even know this had happened until I was looking through the headlines this morning. But the title of this article is Stunning Job Report, ? Minus the indigenous. Bureau of Labor Statistics count Native American unemployment numbers for the first time. So if you've been paying attention to news, you'll know that one of the things the Biden administration has been trumpeting for the past few days is that the unemployment numbers came out, the jobs report numbers came out for the month, and we had a very low unemployment rate and a very good rate of job growth within the country. And that has been reported on by almost every news agency. The administration has mentioned it every chance they're able to, and it's been in the headlines a lot over the past few days and weeks. But if you actually look at the 2020 jobs report, and I'm going to give you an article now from the Brookings Institute, and this is one of the sources that Indian Country used in their reporting, and that they reference in their link in here in the comments now. So they wrote that for the first time, the government published monthly unemployment data on Native Americans, and the picture is stark. I'm actually going to share with you a screenshot of their website. And so if you follow news within Indian Country, right, you know that, and if you heard me talk, or you talk to other people within Indian Country, you will always hear us tell you that unemployment is astronomically high among Native Americans. You know, when I lived on the Navajo Nation during the Great Recession, and we almost never talked about unemployment on the reservation because the country was dealing with 9, 10, 11% unemployment, and we have twice that in a good year. And so why would we be complaining about something around a 10 or 11%, right? This was the thinking. It rarely came up because the country was experiencing what our community experiences most of the time. But again, the problem was the government does not report on Native American unemployment. And so just let this sink in, right? It is February of 2022, and for the very first time, the US government is reporting Native American unemployment numbers. Just let that sink in. And it's horrible. The numbers are horrible, right? This chart, this graph that they show here at the Brookings Institute, it shows unemployment. And back pre-pandemic, a year ago, 2 years ago, we were at about 7%, a little bit above the African American community, far above the 3 and 4% that the white community was experiencing. And we were at about 7.5%. And then when the pandemic hit, we spiked up to 28.6%, almost double, more than double what white America was experiencing, and almost double what some of the other communities were experiencing. And then today, in the January 22nd report, while again, most of the nation was back down to around 5%, we are up over 10% at 11.1%. And so while the country is celebrating how jobs are coming back and unemployment is going down and the economy is doing well, it is without even noting, even though they reported on our numbers, they don't even note the exception of how horrible and how dire things are within Indian Country. And had it not been, right, because who's going to check the Brookings Institute for their news, right? Had it not been for Indian Country Today, a Native American journalist website, news agency, they're reporting this, and it's one of their headlines. And this is why it's so important that we not only have people reporting about the margins, but that we have people reporting from the margins, because it will not only make it bring the story out, but it will give a deeper understanding of what is the context and what's going on, of someone from the community who actually understands this is what the struggle is. And so this is why, and when I did my second cup of coffee talking a few weeks ago about where I get my news sources, and I showed you all the ratings and where different they are and their biases. And then I showed you my list, and I actually go and intentionally check Native news resources. I go to Indian Country Today, I go to Native News Online, I go to Indian Z, I go to Navajo Nation Times, the Navajo Times, and other distinctly, specifically Native websites to get news from Indian country. And I do that because these stories will not be reported on by these other mainstream media outlets. And so I actually have to go and hunt for these stories and find them and intentionally get them, because they're not going to just show up on my on the majority news source resources. And so this is why it's important, and I encourage you to do this, not only with Native news, but with news from within the African American community, LGBTQ, IA2S plus community, right? Look for websites with journalists that are specifically reporting on these issues, Latinx, other marginalized communities, and find the journalists who are writing not just about those communities, but from those communities, so that you can get a deeper understanding of what's going on there. And I want to go back and kind of end this time with a quote from what Julian Brave NoiseCat said as I was listening to his podcast that he wrote about the Census Powwow. And about the 4 minute and 35 second mark, he said this. He was talking about why they were doing the census on a reservation and why it was so important, and how our communities, our Native communities, are so undercounted and underrepresented even in the census. And he said, you see, the census has never accurately counted every Indian in the US. They always undercount. There was the 2010 census where the Bureau missed 1 in every 20 Indians on reservations. Not quite as bad as the 1990 census, which missed more than 1 in 10 on Indian lands. The Constitution explicitly says the census should exclude Indians not taxed, and the government didn't even bother to officially count us until 1850. And if there's one demographic through line in Native American history, that's it. We do not get counted. This is why it's so important to not only have journalists reporting about the margins, but journalists reporting from the margins. Again, so I'm deeply grateful for the work of Julian Brave NoiseCat. I'm deeply grateful for all of the organizations, Indian Country Today, Native News Online, all of the great Native American journalists who I follow on Twitter and Facebook, and whose stories I read. We need you. We need these journalists to report about the margins and from the margins, so we don't just get the pity party stories. We get the fuller historical context that the other journalists are not going to know and understand, and not going to be able to report on accurately. So I wanted to highlight some of that today and just share some of that with you, and encourage you to continue to look for journalists, right, and follow them, who write both about the margins and from the margins. Let me go through and see who's saying something here. Tam Marshall writes, no one talks about unemployment on any reservation across Turtle Island since like ever. If you don't have access to a company to work for, or have transportation to get to a company to work for, guess what? Indigenous peoples won't be able to work. That is a very important comment that Tam makes. I'm just going to highlight it right here, right? Because not only is it we have high unemployment numbers of people who can't get established jobs, but because, and this was true living on the Navajo Nation, right? Because our roads are dirt, because a lot of our people live off the grid, like my family lived for the 3 years we were out in that remote area on the reservation, right? Because you have so many people who have inadequate education, are not the best English skills, right? Their ability to even get a job is often hindered. And so you have so many people who are working, you know, under the counter, who are working, doing some of their own things, whether it's making jewelry, whether it's doing construction on the side. All these people who are working kind of outside the establishment, just trying to make ends meet. And so not only do we have a high number of unemployed people, but we have, I don't even know what the numbers are, but I would bet if you counted the number of underemployed people on our reservations, it would be just astronomically through the roof. And so, yeah, it's 2022, and for the first time, they finally reported on Native American unemployment numbers. And then they didn't mention it when it came out because the news was bad, and they don't like bad news. But at least they counted us. At least they included us this time. So thank you for that comment, Tam. I want to thank everybody for joining me this morning. I have a few other interviews I have to do. I actually just did a podcast with my good friend Sarah Augustine. We just finished. We did one a few months ago, and they were going to release it around this time, but something happened. The recording got corrupted, and we had to re-record it. So we just recorded it this morning, and once that podcast comes out, it's part of their podcast that Sarah Augustine does regarding dismantling the doctrine of discovery. If you don't remember Sarah, she is the woman who wrote The Land Is Not Empty, and this is the book on the doctrine of discovery where I had the privilege of writing the foreword for. And so I will share that link when that comes out. I'm hoping within the next few weeks. But yeah, I hope you have a great day, my relatives. I appreciate you joining me today. It was fun to share this second cup of coffee with you. And yeah, walk in beauty. And maybe learn how to walk in beauty together. Yá'át'ééh and hakone.